Hello and welcome to this morning Moneycontrol live stream. I'm Nandita Khemka and you're watching Morning Trade. Well, over the next 30 minutes, we'll be talking about all the stocks in focus today, all the sectoral trends to watch out for, some trading strategies, as well as your queries, stock-related queries that you have. You can get them answered by our expert on the show. But before we get him on board, let's take a look at what the global handover is looking like this morning. Well, Wall Street closes lower as concerns over high bond yields weigh on investor sentiment. Now, the tech-heavy Nasdaq led the decline. Market now awaits cues from the Fed Chairman Jerome Powell's speech later tonight. Meanwhile, Asia opens higher. The SGX Nifty 2 indicates a positive start for the Indian market. Tata Steel reports a net loss of over 2,500 crores in the third quarter. EBITDA misses estimates by a huge margin, while margin contracts on the back of weakness in the European business. Nifty heavyweights Bharti Airtel and Adani Ports will report third quarter numbers today. From the broader market, also watch out for numbers from Ambuja Cements and Deepak Nitrite. Two earthquakes of 7.5 magnitude leave over 3,800 dead in Turkey and Syria. The death toll is expected to move higher as rescue operations remain underway. Well, let's get in on board. Our expert for today, Hemen Kapadia of KRChoksey Securities, joins us now. Good morning, Hemen. Good to have you on the show. Well, we saw another volatile session yesterday with the Nifty shutting shop 0.5% lower. But this morning, once again, we are getting positive cues from the SGX Nifty. In fact, it is indicating at a start above that 17,800 mark. What are the kind of levels you'll be watching out for on the Nifty as well as Bank Nifty today?
A very good morning to you, Nandita. Thank you for having me on the show. Frankly speaking, we've been in a corrective phase for quite some time now, Nandita. If you were to look at the charts, we've been here for what, how many weeks? Almost, let's say, almost 11 weeks, Nandita. We made lower top, lower bottoms. Now, yes, there is a hint of stability coming in. And like you're saying, if we sustain above 17,800 from a closing point of view, one, that would be a small positive, and the sell-off that happened when it closed below 17,792 would be negated to some effect. So as of now, at the weeks, which was at 18.5, 19 last week, maybe it was the budget at the FOMC, volatile market condition, that seems to have simmered down to sub 50. Bank Nifty showing some resilience. Metals are under pressure, but it's IT and auto which look good. So frankly speaking, we are stabilizing. And yes, if we close above 17,948, Nandita, that would mean if further fill up to bulls. So I'd say cautiously optimistic. We seem to be stabilizing. And yeah, going forward, if these levels are taken out, I think chances are the markets are setting the mood for a comeback. Nandita.
Well, the markets are setting the mood for a comeback, and cautious optimism is the mood now. But Hemen, I want to talk to you about the metals pack. The index has shed somewhere around 10% over the last 5 days. In fact, if you look at the results, Tata Steel reported a surprise loss in the third quarter, and Hindalco's arm Novelis has also reported weaker than expected numbers. How would you advise investors to play these two stocks now, Tata Steel and Hindalco?
Well, if I were to digress just a bit, Nandita, if you look at the US, if you look at the dollar index, obviously there's an increase in the dollar index, metals come under pressure. We've sort of posted a bottom and we're staging a comeback. So I think that doesn't augur well for metals as a whole. Coming back to the stock specifics that you mentioned, Nandita, I think Hindalco is hanging on for dear life, so to speak. 446.5 is strong support. And we're just over there, and we're down for 4 weeks. One, the short-term chart seemed to suggest a mild oversold situation. A bounce cannot be ruled out, but we had today on Tuesday, Nandita. This is applying only on a Friday because that's when the weekly chart would come to an end. If we close below 446.50 on Friday evening, Nandita, that would mean bad. In the sense, we already broken the last month's low. This long-term picture was a bit iffy, and this would just sort of exacerbate the situation. So not looking very pretty. But if the bounce fizzled out and we close below 446.50, Tata Steel, obviously, we'll see negatives, lower top, lower bottom, crossover shell by the mechanical indicators on the daily chart. Couldn't take out 125. Hindalco looks weaker, but yes, I think there would be apparent pressure. In terms of levels, Nandita, 115, 105 support levels.
Right, so those are the levels to watch out for on those counters. Hemen, stay on. Let me also bring on board Peter Mcguire, who is the CEO of Exim Australia, to discuss the metal space in greater details. Good morning, Peter. Good to have you on the show. Just speaking to you about Tata Steel's performance, it's pretty weakish. In fact, it has reported a surprise loss in the third quarter vis-a-vis expectations of a profit. Now, European operations have been weak on fears of recession and demand slowdown. We've already seen a sharp fall in global steel prices. My question to you is, how long do you expect the weakness to continue? In fact, do you expect demand to now improve and steel prices to pick up, especially after the China reopening?
Well, good morning. Yeah, a couple of things on those questions. I think first off, we've got to be considerate where we were this time last year and how 22 played out. And then moving through, we've just come out of Lunar New Year, that quiet time as far as January consumption for the Chinese. So I'm expecting some increase as far as demand over this quarter, leading from really the start of February onwards for China. And I think that will engage a great portion of the world, and we've had a nice move to the upside for some of those base metals like copper and nickel and zinc and aluminium. They've given back a little bit of that profit in the last week or so, but I think that will just giving up a bit of the hot air, and it will increase as far as price and opportunity for traders, I think, over this next quarter, higher pricing.
Right, Peter, what's your take on Indian steel, given the fact that the government has announced a 33% jump in capex for the next financial year?
Well, I think overall you would have to think that India will, and especially companies like Tata, will perform, I think, quite well from an infrastructure side, from demand internally and exports. And so I think it's favourable. And where that moves from here will be, I think, a consolidation phase. We've seen as far as the last 3 to 4 months, and I'm really expecting some good signs leading through the next, say, 6 months for consumption across all of Asia and primarily India and naturally China.
Well, expect a pickup in consumption over the next 6 months. That's the call from Peter. Peter, reports are suggesting that the US may slap 200% tariff on Russian aluminium imports, yes, right? As it looks to blunt Russia's role as a global commodity powerhouse. Now, if that happens, how do you see it impacting aluminium prices?
Well, they've got to be very careful, because I'm conscious as far as Mr. Modi and Mr. Putin and the Saudis, how they're playing against the petrodollar and what their mechanism is going to be as far as payment in other currencies. So if they come with a heavy hand, which they will do as far as aluminium, for Mr. Putin's aluminium and Russia, then I think that could cause some concerns as far as payment, and they may look to be paid in ruble or changing the mechanism for payment. And I don't think that Russia, considering its powerhouse, is going to take a backward seat on this. I think they'll be aggressive, and I don't think it's going to work very successfully at all.
Right, Peter. Tell us, what's your overall take on the commodity space? Which commodity do you feel stands out for the rest of the year?
Well, if you were asking me this time last week, I would have said gold and silver. They've given back a fair bit of that hot air in the last 3 or 4 sessions, 3 sessions. And the US dollar has strengthened dramatically, but we had that very strong non-farm payroll on Friday. So I still believe that there's upside for precious metals, and I think that 23 will be a stellar year for them, both physical and paper. But a lot of retail traders are certainly looking at hoarding more physical, gold and silver.
Well, gold and silver looking attractive for the rest of the year. Lastly, I want to get in your take on oil prices. Brent is hovering around that $81 mark. Yes. Where do you expect crude prices to settle over the next 6 months or thereabouts?
Well, again, after we've seen that big washout over the last, say, 5 to 7 sessions, where we were nearly touching 90, now we're touching 80 for Brent, I still believe that oil prices will edge up higher from here. The US dollar is a big concern, but I think energy prices will be higher than lower in the foreseeable future. So there's another concern. And that's why the aluminium situation with Mr. Putin, they've got to be very careful on that.
Peter, also want to get in your thoughts on the Fed rate trajectory. Last time we saw a 25 basis point rate hike. Would you expect the Fed to pause in the next policy meet, or would you expect another 25 basis point hike before they look at a pause?
Well, we've got to see. There's a fair bit of water that's got to pass under the bridge. With full employment, we're at record levels as far as a record low back to 1969, 53 years as far as unemployment. So that's very, very strong. And the overall theme is inflation under control? Bank of England and the ECB both raised 50 basis points towards the tail end of last week. So I'm erring on the side that there's still another 25 out there. And I think that we've got to be probably a little bit more aggressive as far as curtailing or pulling back that inflation. So, yeah, I'm not going to be surprised if you see another 25.
Right, Peter, it was great talking to you. Thanks a lot for taking out time this morning.
Thank you very much and take care.
Sure. Well, getting back to Hemen then. Hemen, let's get in some views on particular stocks. Talking about LIC Housing Finance, well, it reported a 37% drop in its profit for the third quarter. If you look at the shares, they've lost somewhere around 3% on a month to date. In fact, over the last 1 month, even over the last 5 days or so, it has lost somewhere around 1% or thereabouts. What is the chart setup looking like for LIC Housing Finance? Would you expect more downside going forward?
I'd go with your trend of thought, Nandita, because yes, there's a lower top, lower bottom situation at play on the daily charts. It's quoting below the 55-day exponential moving average. If I look at the weekly, I mean, all the mechanical indicators are in sell mode. Yes, there is support between 380, 388. Now, if we hang on to that level till Friday, it looks difficult, but if it hangs on to that level, yes, I think then we'd see some respite coming in. If not, that means this sequence of lower top, lower bottom continues. So not looking very convincing, Nandita.
Well, LIC Housing Finance not looking very convincing on the charts. Moving on to Muthoot Finance, this company also reported a 12% drop in its profit for the third quarter. In fact, we also have a query coming in from Prabhu, and he wants to know your long-term view about Manappuram and Muthoot Finance. Over the last 5-6 days, it hasn't really done much, but it hasn't been in the negative zone as such. What would you advise investors to do with these two companies, Muthoot and Manappuram?
If I were to take a longer term view on Muthoot, Nandita, it's moved up from almost 75.80 in 2013 to a high of 17.25. It's been a humongous multi-bagger. When you have such a gigantic run, I mean, logic says that we're going to walk into a correction of a greater degree. And that's what has happened. Well, for the last 1.5 years or so, Muthoot Finance remains in a corrective phase. Support comes in at 1,950. Resistance comes in at 1150, 1200. So, frankly speaking, it's gone nowhere. I don't expect it to do anything much. And yes, longer term point of view, the picture still seems to suggest that it's going to take some time for it to stabilize. A new bull market or a big up move, a bounce, yes, because we come up from a high of 1720 to 950. So frankly speaking, we've almost become half Nandita as far as Muthoot is concerned over the last 12 months or so. So a corrective bounce, yes, but the picture doesn't seem to inspire too much of confidence from a longer term point. What I mean to say, the correction is still on and it's going to take its own sweet time to play out. Coming back to Manappuram, I think Manappuram has a deeper correction, but the outlook remains almost the same. We moved from 10 to 225, so now we walked into a bigger correction, and now we are floundering. We are meandering. We are going nowhere, Nandita. Yes, if the stock comes off from 225 to 80, we've come to 125. Okay, that's not even a 50% retracement of the fall. So if we take out 126, yes, then we see an upside till 140. If we don't, we'll be here. So medium term going nowhere, long term, this correction hasn't played out. It may not go down too much in terms of price, but in terms of time, it's going to take its own sweet time to end this correction. Nandita.
Well, The correction will take its own sweet time to play out. That's the call from Hemen. Prabhu, hope that answers your query. Moving on to the next counter, JK Paper. It has been in an uptrend over the last 5 sessions or thereabouts. It reported its numbers yesterday. Profits have nearly doubled on a YOY basis. Revenues have grown 60% again on a YOY basis. So good numbers. Would you expect this stock to clock more upside, Hemen?
A knee-jerk reaction, short-term positive, Nandita, yes. But after 32 weeks of, it's gone nowhere. But if I look at the background, Nandita, once again, stock has gone up from 60 to 450. It's tired, it's recovering, it's recouping, it's taking a breather. So after 32 weeks, yes, a small bounce, not a small bounce, but yeah, a positive reaction to the numbers cannot be ruled out. The bigger range comes in between 360 on the downside, 450 on the upside, Nandita. So till we take out the upper range, the upper side of this range, yeah, a 20-30 point bounce isn't going to change. And currently, yes, it seems to be consolidating. But after 32 weeks, like I said, we'll have to wait for a breakout to get a clear trending move from a medium-term point of view.
Well, wait for a breakout to get a clear picture on where the trend is headed. The next one on my list is Balaji. Amines weak numbers. Profits have slumped 30% over the last 5 sessions. It had lost, the stock has lost somewhere around 10% or thereabouts. How is the chart setup looking for this one, Hemen?
Well, frankly speaking, Nandita, somewhere this is built into the price. I mean, 30 days, 200 to 50, 200. It's a dream run over the last couple of years, Nandita. Okay, this was 2020 and then 2021, 1.5 years. And since then, from 5,223, we've come up to 2,300. So we more than halved in the time of the decline. So yes, somewhere it seems to be built in. Short term chance, it gets to be a bit oversold. 2250 is support. If we were to sustain, if you were to close and sustain below 2250, either for three trading sessions or on the weekly chart, that means the lower top, lower bottom scenario continues. I don't see too much of a respite coming in from a medium to long term point of view. Important levels have been breached. Frankly speaking, 2696 was very strong support on the monthly chart. Now that being breached after multiple tests does not augur well. Yes, some short-term relief after a knee-jerk negative reaction may be possible, but the overall picture still sort of has a negative overhang.
Right, not looking all that inspiring at the current juncture. Let's also get in some viewer queries, Hemen, this morning. I would like to take up a query on Adani Enterprise. Of course, we've seen relentless selling in the Adani Group companies. In fact, if you look at the share price of Adani Enterprise, it has nearly halved over the last 5 sessions. Parth Chaudhary has written in and he's bought Adani Enterprise shares at 1150. In fact, he is in profits at the current juncture. He wants to know if he should book it and exit or he should hold on to it right now. What would you advise him to do?
See, frankly speaking, I feel most of the negatives are in the price, but it's been an event-driven stock for obvious reasons. One does not know how many more negatives are going to crawl out of the woodwork, or this is done, or there's going to be a difference in the MSCI weightage. I mean, whatever. There are still a few question marks remaining. Frankly speaking, difficult to take a call on something like this. I feel that things have been overdone. That is my personal view. But if you're making money in a market like this, in a matter of few days, I'd say book some profit. From a longer term point of view, sorry to digress, I think Adani Port is a crown jewel. I think that is something I would look at. Once again, not at one go, maybe in bits and pieces and installments, but that would be my personal preference. But yes, if you're making money in this, I don't see any harm in booking profit. Though, once again, I feel that we are at supports. Things seem to have been overdone actually. Nandita.
Right. It won't hurt to book some profits at the current level. That's what Hemen is advising. On to the next query then. This one is coming in on Vedanta. Satya CK has written in. He wants to know that he holds shares of Vedanta at a price of 307. And he wants to know your short to medium term view on the counter. Metals have been under pressure over the last few sessions. In fact, over the last 5 days, Vedanta has shed somewhere around 6% or thereabouts. He is still making marginal losses at the current juncture. What would you advise him to do?
We spoke a bit about this earlier, Nandita. The dollar index seems to have made a short-term bottom. This might convert into a medium-term bottom. What I mean to say, the dollar index is bouncing back and strong. So metals would obviously come under pressure. And his cost of 307, I'm not sure if he's bought it new or he's bought it some time back. If he has, he's got two decently heavy dividends, so his cost would have come down. Having said that, if he's not, from a slightly medium-term point of view, we are at supports. If we were to close below 300 on the weekly chart, I think that would be a negative. A lower top, lower bottom on the daily chart, coupled with a crossover sell by the MACD, seems to suggest, and a breach and a close below the 55-day exponential moving average would seem to suggest that yes, we seem to be walking into a correction. As of now, this is restricted to the daily chart. But if this were to spill over on the weekly, then it would mean that we've gone for a toss for the next 6 to 8 weeks. So once again, if it was a Friday, I would have, if it was a weekly chart for form, I would have slightly more conviction. But from whatever I've seen, it's slipping into a correction, which might get deeper. So assuming I'm not sure about his time frame, but safety says it's a sell on bounce unless you have a very longer term point.
Sell on bounce unless you have a longer term horizon. Moving on to the next query, this one is coming on LTI Mindtree. Rishi Ranjan wants to know your views on this counter. Now, this stock has done pretty well on a 5-day basis. It's up somewhere around 5% or thereabouts. What would you advise investors to do? Is this a time to buy into one of these mid-cap IT companies?
You hit the nail on the head, Nandita. It's done well over the last 5 days. Yes, resilience, yes, and frankly speaking, IT is a saving grace in a market like this. And till the merger, I think LTI was a market outperformer. After the merger, we've sort of slowed down, maybe lost a little bit of the momentum. Doesn't look bad, but I would prefer something like maybe a Coforge or maybe a persistent from the mid-cap space. But yes, LTI doesn't look bad. We've entered a short-term uptrend. Further upside seems to be on the cards, depending on the time frame. See, the markets are still very volatile. There are a lot of cross currents flowing in. We have a credit policy, Fed hiked interest rates. Things are still in a flux, so to speak. So I'd say if you do plan to buy, do not buy everything at one go. You can do it in a sort of installment system. But coming back to your main question, yes, the setup seems better. Technically, the stock seems to be improving.
Right, setup is looking good and stock seems to be improving going forward. Let's talk about ITC. This stock is near its record highs. Everything is working in its favor. Numbers were pretty good and the tax incidence post budget is also lower than expected. So things are working well for ITC. What would you advise investors to do on this one? Should they buy into this counter and look for levels above 400 going forward?
Well, frankly speaking, Nandita, you answer the question yourself. Yes, I think they can buy and they can look for levels above 400. It spent 4 years twiddling thumbs, so to speak, between 2017 and 2020. And now it's back in the limelight after a long time, Nandita. So distinct outperformance, just like you've mentioned, the stock has posted a fresh all-time high in this entire listed history. Has done well. I think a further upside seems like a distinct possibility, yes. But I would suggest a buy on small decline. The last 4 trading sessions, we moved up from 328 to 388. That's quite a lot. It's a mainline stock, heavy stock. So ideally, a small decline would make the risk-reward ratio in his favor, but I'd completely go with what you're saying, Nandita. 400 plus seems like a distinct possibility.
Well, 400 plus seems like a distinct possibility on ITC, and you could look at buying the counter on small dips. Next query is coming in from Pooja HR, and she has a query on Marico. Now, the stock was buoyant in yesterday's session. It is somewhere around that 500 levels on the charts. What would you suggest investors do with a medium to short term perspective on this one, Hemen?
It's been almost 13 months, Nandita. The stock has gone nowhere. The range is between 470 on the downside and 550 on the upside, and almost 13-month Nandita. So frankly speaking, there is no trending bias if you're seeing from that point of view. Well, it's a FMCG, and when the markets are iffy, you have FMCG as a defensive. Now you also have IT as a defensive. But no, it's gone nowhere. So unless we have a longer term point of view, at least from a short to medium term, I don't see any particular momentum in the stock. Yes, a weekly close above 550 would trigger off a multi-month breakout, and we also see it take a pot shot at its all-time high. So I would be more positive over 550. But after such a long time, I mean, we would have to wait for a breakout on either side. Though a downside breakout doesn't seem to be on the horizon currently, Nandita.
Right, I would like to move on to my next query that's coming in on Gland Pharma. Now, this stock has been in a steady downtrend and in fact has lost somewhere around 25% or thereabouts over the last 1 month. We have a query on this counter. Jamula Harikrishna has written in and he wants to know whether he should average Gland Pharma at current levels.
Firstly, I wouldn't advise, catching a falling knife. Inverted pyramiding isn't what I would look for. We have 3.5 years of data, and that's almost 4 years. Now, that's not enough to take a longer term point of view. But since it went to 4,300, it's been in a steady downhill move. And frankly speaking, even now, I don't think anything has changed. The series of progressively lower tops and bottoms continues unabated, Nandita. So, and we are posting fresh all-time lows on a regular basis for the past few months. Unless we see stability followed by a consolidation, I'm not sure if a V-shaped recovery is on the anvil here, but stability, sideways movement, higher top, higher bottom, positive divergence, some sort of a technical reversal is needed before we take that call. Currently, that's not at all visible on the chart. So I'd say stay away until you see a clear reversal. Maybe you'll buy it 50 rupees higher, but buy it when you have more conviction that yes, it's turned the corner, worst is over, and now we can look at an upside. And we are not there yet, Nandita.
Right. I want to also get in a query on Paytm. I know there isn't too much historical data to track this stock, Hemen, but the numbers have been pretty good. It has narrowed down its losses. In fact, the stock was up somewhere around 6% yesterday. And another point to note is that it has achieved operating profitability 3 quarters ahead of its guidance. Over the last 2 days, we saw a healthy rally come into to this counter. Would you say that this is an attractive entry point into Paytm?
Well, maybe it sounds like a repetition, Nandita, but I'd say cautiously optimistic. Cautiously optimistic because the past history hasn't been too convincing. But yes, coming back to current levels, I agree with you. It does look interesting. Weekly chart, I mean, so a medium-term bottom, I believe, has been formed. If I were to look at levels, 500 is important. 500 should hold. If it breaks, that's a problem. Doesn't look like breaking. Above 585, we're looking at an upside. Yes. So I'd say with a stop loss of 500, I think one can take a medium-term view. The technical setup has distinctly improved on the weekly charts. Like you said, not too much data for the monthly, but yeah, it looks good, and I believe further upside seems to be on the cards.
Well, Chandu Vutukuri had written in with this query. Hope that answers your query, Chandu. Now, next up, I would like to talk about Asian Paints. The numbers weren't really inspiring, the third quarter numbers. But on the charts, how is this one looking, Hemen, Asian Paints?
Short-term oversold, I believe a bounce is around the corner. The medium-term picture has gone for a toss, and so also on the monthly charts, things are looking a bit iffy. I mean, we've Asian Paints, Pidilite, these are some of the stocks which have been in upmost for the last 30, 35 years, Nandita. So we've stagnated, and it might fall under its own weight after some time. So currently, short-term recovery coming, medium-term negative overhang, but support at lower levels. It's the long-term charts I'm slightly worried about. Maybe it's a bit too premature. The quarter hasn't ended. Whatever I'm telling you is based on quarterly charts, and we are just in the beginning of Feb. Quarter will end in March. But yeah, if 2600 were to break decisively by the end of March, I think after a long time, Asian Paints would look dicey on the long-term chart. So I would be slightly cautious at this point. Have a slight wait and watch approach. Take a review at the end of March. Something doesn't seem right in the technicals. I would be a bit cautious. Nandita.
Well, a bit cautious on Asian Paints. Manish Khedekar, I hope this answers your query. Well, my last query to you, in fact, the last of our viewer queries today would be on Airtel. The company is reporting its numbers today. In fact, over the last 1 month, the chart has lost some, the stock has lost somewhere around 3% or thereabouts. How is the chart setup looking for Airtel, Hemen? Would you suggest buying into this counter?
Longer term point of view, yes, Nandita. No, medium term, things are not looking very pretty. 755, very important support. We've hung on to that support for the last 4 weeks out of 5. So not much to worry till 755 holds. But we walked into a corrective phase. Short term, there seem to be some positives, but the weekly chart indicates that the correction that we walked into isn't yet over. So I'd wait just a wee bit and wait for some more technical positive cues on the medium term charts before taking that call.
Right. Well, this wraps up our query segment for today. But Hemen, very quickly, what are your stock recommendations for today?
Yeah, quickly. Firstly, a buy call on Bajaj Finance. It's a conditional buy call. Worst seems to be over on the daily chart, but since it's moved up a bit, it's a conditional buy call on decline. Buy Bajaj Finance at 6050. Stop loss 5850. Target 6450. Second stock, once again, is the condition. I'm giving conditional buy call because the markets are too volatile and not yet stable. Is a buy call on Coromandel International at 880. Stop loss 855. Target 930. Oversold, downside limited. Results are out. Positive divergence. Stock looks set for about that. That's the
Well, Bajaj Finance and Coromandel International, two of Hemen's recommendations for today. Well, with that, Hemen, thanks a lot for taking out time and joining us and answering all our viewer queries patiently. Well, with that, it's a wrap on Morning Trade, but don't go anywhere because coming up next is Opening Bell with Santo.